The morning sun shimmered on the endless blue of the Pacific as a group of Japanese pilots lounged beneath the wing of a Zero, laughter echoing across the coral airstrip. Cigarettes dangled from lips, and a battered radio played a tinny march, barely audible over the distant hum of engines. The mood was light, almost festive. Another American carrier raid had been reported overnight, but the pilots shrugged it off. "The Americans? Again?" one joked, drawing a round of chuckles. "Let them come. Their bombs never hit anything important." Another pilot, still in his flight suit, mimed a clumsy dive, sending his friends into fits of laughter. The consensus was clear. These raids were a nuisance, nothing more, a sign of desperation from an enemy who couldn't land a decisive blow. For months, the Imperial Japanese Navy had ruled these waters. Their victories at Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, and the Java Sea had given them an aura of invincibility. American carriers, once feared, were now seen as little more than targets for target practice. The pilots' confidence was not just bravado. It was built on a string of real triumphs. They had watched American planes fall in flames, seen enemy ships slip beneath the waves, and returned to base as heroes. The idea that the next raid could be any different seemed almost laughable. Yet, as the pilots prepared for another routine patrol, a few mechanics exchanged uneasy glances. Reports of new American tactics, of bombers flying lower and faster, had begun to circulate. But such rumors were quickly drowned out by the easy confidence of the aces. No one on the Japanese side could have imagined what the Yorktown's bombers would unleash next. The laughter that floated over the Pacific that morning would soon be replaced by shock, disbelief, and a new respect for an enemy they thought they understood. In the first half of 1942, the Pacific Ocean was a Japanese domain. Their carriers and pilots had swept aside every challenge, from the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor to the relentless advance through the Philippines, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies. Japanese naval aviation was the envy of the world, its Zero fighters unmatched in agility, its dive bombers and torpedo planes striking with deadly precision. Each victory reinforced a sense of superiority, and the myth of Japanese invincibility grew with every island captured and every Allied fleet scattered. American carriers, by contrast, were seen as a nuisance, persistent but ultimately ineffective. Japanese commanders dismissed the hit-and-run raids as little more than pinpricks, a sign that the U.S. Navy lacked the strength or resolve for a decisive battle. Reports of American bombers missing their targets or being shot down in droves only fueled this perception. In Tokyo and at forward bases, the mood was one of celebration and confidence. Pilots became celebrities. Their exploits splashed across newspapers and radio broadcasts. The war, it seemed, was going Japan's way. But beneath the surface, the U.S. Navy was changing. Every setback became a lesson. Every loss a catalyst for innovation. American engineers worked around the clock to improve bomb sights, radios, and aircraft armor. Pilots trained relentlessly, learning from their mistakes and developing new tactics for carrier warfare. While Japan celebrated its aces, the U.S. Navy was quietly preparing a new kind of answer, one that would combine technology, teamwork, and sheer determination. As the stage shifted toward the next great confrontation, a single ship and her crew would come to embody this transformation. The story of the USS Yorktown was about to begin, and with it, the balance of power in the Pacific would start to tilt. USS Yorktown was more than just a ship. She was a floating city of steel and sweat, carrying the hopes of a nation still reeling from defeat. Her decks bustled with activity as sailors and airmen prepared for the next strike, each man acutely aware of the risks that lay ahead. The scars of previous battles were still visible: patched hull plates, scorched paint, and the quiet absence of friends lost at Coral Sea. Yet, beneath the surface, a new sense of resolve had taken root. The Yorktown's crew had learned the hard way that survival depended on more than luck. It demanded preparation, discipline, and a willingness to adapt. In the ready rooms, pilots pored over maps and intelligence reports, memorizing every detail of the enemy's defenses. Mechanics worked through the night, tuning engines and checking bomb racks, determined to wring every ounce of performance from their aircraft. The ship's leadership, from the captain to the youngest ensign, drilled relentlessly, rehearsing every maneuver and emergency procedure. The memory of past failures was a constant companion, but so too was the knowledge that this mission could be different. Technical upgrades offered a glimmer of hope. New bomb sights promised greater accuracy, while improved radios allowed for tighter coordination between squadrons. Armor plating and self-sealing fuel tanks gave pilots a fighting chance to make it home. Still, the tension was palpable. Every man aboard knew the odds, but also what was at stake if they failed. The Japanese had grown accustomed to victory, and the world was watching to see if the Americans could strike back. As the final checks were completed and the sun dipped toward the horizon, the Yorktown's air group gathered on the flight deck. Engines roared to life, and the smell of fuel and salt filled the air. The moment of truth was at hand. In the coming hours, the fate of the ship, her crew, and perhaps the entire Pacific War would hang in the balance. The order to launch was imminent, and with it, the chance to prove that American resolve could match and surpass Japanese confidence. The first rays of dawn glinted off the wings of Yorktown's bombers as they lined up on the flight deck, engines thundering in anticipation. One by one, the aircraft surged forward, leaping into the sky and banking toward enemy waters. The air was thick with tension, every pilot knew the risks, but the sense of purpose was unmistakable. As the formation climbed and settled into its course, the men exchanged brief glances, silent acknowledgments of the mission's gravity. Below, the vast Pacific stretched out, deceptively calm, hiding the enemy fleet somewhere beyond the horizon. The flight toward the target was a study in nerves. Radio chatter was kept to a minimum, each man focused on his instruments and the distant specks that might signal enemy fighters. The bombers flew low, hugging the waves to avoid detection, while the fighters circled above, scanning for threats. Every mile brought them closer to danger and to the chance to strike a blow that would be remembered. On the Japanese side, the first reports of incoming aircraft were met with little urgency. Another American raid, the officers assumed, likely as ineffective as the last. Pilots were roused from their bunks, some still half-dressed, and scrambled to their zeros with a sense of routine. The enemy expected another nuisance raid. What they got was a storm. As Yorktown's bombers broke through the clouds, the Japanese defenders realized too late that this attack was different, more coordinated, more aggressive, and backed by a determination they had not seen before. The sky erupted in chaos. Anti-aircraft guns opened up, tracers streaking through the morning light, while American bombers pressed on, undeterred by the flak and the swirling dogfights above. The Japanese scrambled to mount a defense, but the momentum had shifted. The Yorktown's air group was not here to harass. They were here to destroy. As the battle reached its crescendo, the true turning point of the raid was about to unfold, and the fate of both fleets would be decided in the next few minutes. The Yorktown's bombers roared into the heart of the Japanese formation, engines screaming as they dove through a wall of anti-aircraft fire. Pilots gripped their controls, eyes fixed on the ships below, every instinct focused on the target. The sky was a maelstrom, flak bursts blossomed all around, shrapnel rattled against fuselages, and tracer rounds stitched the air. Yet the American crews pressed on, their training and discipline holding firm even as chaos erupted around them. Dive bombers peeled off in tight formation, each pilot waiting for the perfect moment before releasing his payload. Bomb bay doors yawned open, and the first bombs tumbled earthward, slicing through the smoke and haze. Below, Japanese sailors scrambled for cover. Officers shouted orders, and the decks of cruisers and carriers became scenes of frantic activity. The first explosions sent geysers of water and fire skyward, rocking the ships and sending shockwaves through the fleet. Direct hits tore into the hulls of Japanese vessels, igniting fuel stores and ammunition, while near misses battered the decks and left crews reeling. Amid the chaos, the coordination of the Yorktown's air group was unmistakable. Pilots called out targets, adjusted their runs, and covered each other from enemy fighters. Gunners in the rear seats blazed away at Zeros that swooped in for the kill, buying precious seconds for the bombers to complete their attack. The teamwork was seamless, a testament to months of relentless training and the shared understanding that failure was not an option. For the Japanese pilots and commanders, the shock was immediate and profound. The raid was unlike anything they had faced before, relentless, precise, and devastating. Communications broke down as ships took damage, and confusion spread through the ranks. The myth of American ineffectiveness was shattered in a matter of minutes. In the smoke and thunder of the attack, the balance of power in the Pacific began to shift. Nothing would be the same after this day. As the last bombs fell and the Yorktown's planes turned for home, the stunned silence aboard the Japanese ships spoke volumes. The aftermath of the raid would force a reckoning, not just with the damage inflicted, but with the realization that the Americans had found their answer and the war at sea had entered a new and dangerous phase. Smoke still drifted across the water as the Yorktown's bombers disappeared over the horizon, leaving devastation in their wake. On the decks of battered Japanese ships, stunned sailors moved through the wreckage, counting the cost of the raid. Fires raged below decks, and the acrid smell of burning fuel hung heavy in the air. Damage control teams worked frantically to contain flooding and save wounded comrades, while officers pored over casualty lists and damage reports with grim faces. The scale of destruction was undeniable. Several ships crippled, others listing, and the pride of the fleet left scarred and vulnerable. For the Japanese pilots who had survived the onslaught, disbelief mingled with a sobering new respect. The enemy they had mocked as clumsy and ineffective had just delivered a blow that would be talked about for months. One pilot, writing in his diary that night, confessed, "We thought the Americans were amateurs. Today, we learned otherwise." The laughter that had filled the air that morning was gone, replaced by a quiet, uneasy fear. Commanders convened emergency meetings, desperate to understand how the raid had succeeded and how to prevent another. Orders went out to reinforce anti-aircraft defenses, revise patrol patterns, and study the tactics that had caught them off guard. On the American side, the mood was a mix of relief and pride. Pilots who had risked everything returned to the Yorktown to find their shipmates cheering, slapping backs, and sharing stories of narrow escapes and impossible shots. Mechanics rushed to refuel and rearm the planes, already preparing for the next mission. Yet, beneath the celebration was a sober awareness of the cost. Planes lost, friends missing, and the knowledge that the enemy would not be caught off guard again. Strategically, the raid marked a turning point. Japanese planners realized that American carrier raids could no longer be dismissed as mere harassment. The U.S. Navy had proven it could strike hard, coordinate complex attacks, and adapt faster than expected. The balance of power in the Pacific was shifting, and both sides knew that the next battles would be fought with a new sense of urgency and respect. The war had changed, and the lessons of the Yorktown's raid would echo across every carrier deck and command center in the months to come. The shockwaves from the Yorktown's raid rippled far beyond the immediate aftermath, reshaping the very nature of carrier warfare in the Pacific. For the U.S. Navy, the success was more than a tactical victory. It was proof that American carriers could not only survive, but dominate in the face of a confident enemy. Morale soared across the fleet. Pilots and sailors who had once doubted their own effectiveness now carried themselves with a new sense of purpose. The Yorktown's air group became a symbol of what was possible when training, technology, and courage converged at the right moment. Naval strategists pored over every detail of the raid, eager to replicate its success. They refined carrier doctrine, emphasizing coordinated strikes, flexible attack plans, and the importance of surprise. Communications between ships and squadrons were improved, and new training regimens focused on rapid response and adaptability. The lessons learned from the Yorktown's attack were quickly disseminated throughout the Pacific Fleet, shaping the tactics used at Coral Sea, Midway, and beyond. American carriers began to operate in larger, more integrated task forces, maximizing their offensive power while protecting each other from counterattack. Technological innovation accelerated as well. The raid highlighted the value of improved bomb sights, radar-guided interception, and better aircraft armor. Engineers worked tirelessly to upgrade planes and ships, ensuring that each new engagement would be fought with the latest advancements. The Yorktown herself became a legend, her name spoken with respect and awe by friend and foe alike. Stories of her crew's bravery and the precision of her bombers inspired a generation of naval aviators. For the Japanese, the raid was a wake-up call. Commanders reevaluated their own tactics, increasing patrols and dispersing ships to avoid concentrated attacks. They invested in better anti-aircraft defenses and began to study American methods with a new seriousness. The myth of invincibility was gone, replaced by a grudging respect for an enemy that had proven both resourceful and relentless. The lessons learned would shape every carrier battle that followed. The Yorktown's raid was not just a single victory. It was the spark that ignited a transformation in naval warfare, setting the stage for the epic clashes that would decide the fate of the Pacific. As the war moved forward, both sides would fight not just with weapons, but with the hard-earned wisdom of experience. The story of the Yorktown's raid is a powerful reminder of the dangers that come with arrogance and complacency. In war, as in life, the greatest threat often comes not from overwhelming force, but from the quiet determination and ingenuity of those who have been underestimated. The Japanese pilots who laughed at American carrier raids learned this lesson the hard way, as the Yorktown's bombers shattered their confidence and forced a reckoning with reality. Innovation, relentless training, and the resolve to adapt turned what was once seen as a minor threat into a force that could change the course of a campaign. The legacy of the Yorktown's air group endures not just in the ships they sank or the battles they won, but in the way they redefined what was possible for American naval aviation. Their courage and skill became the foundation for every victory that followed, and their story stands as a testament to the power of never underestimating an opponent. How many victories are lost before the first shot is fired, simply because one side refuses to see the other's strength? As you reflect on this chapter of history, consider the moments in your own life when you've been underestimated or when you've underestimated someone else. Share your thoughts and stories below, and join the conversation about the lessons we can all learn from the skies over the Pacific.